Okay, so I would like to also start off the panel with a land acknowledgement. For me, I'm tuning in from San Francisco Bay Area, the traditional territory of Ramaytush Ohlone. I honor the lands and waters they have stewarded here for time immemorial. While we as a Fashion Revolution USA team are still learning and pushing ourselves to do better to support Indigenous communities, we are continuing our journey here today and encourage you all to learn about the importance of land acknowledgements and what territories you reside on. And feel free to take a picture, screenshot of the resources here. They're super great, and they will also be pasted in the chat as well. I want to give a quick shout out to the West Coast team. These are the Fashion Revolution members who put together this amazing career panel. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to them and a huge thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Zoe, our moderator.
Hi everyone, I'm Zoe Slipper. I'm an undergraduate at UC Davis. I study international relations, Spanish, and public health. And I am passionate about fighting fast fashion, and I'm really interested in sustainable fashion in general. So I'm really excited to moderate this event for you.
Hi, my name is Clementina. I am the Sustainable Latina. I am calling from Bay Miwok, which is near Ohlone in San Francisco Bay Area. I'm very happy to be here. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I want to say the first part of my introduction into fashion was with Lan Terry, who used to design for Prince and Janet Jackson, a lot of celebrities, doing custom work. And I actually worked as a pattern maker, first pattern maker. And he actually told me that I did not get the job because of my talent. It was really because of my tenacity and my confidence. So I'm really, really excited to share more about how others could get in the industry and overcome certain adversities. And like I said, I do have over 20 years of experience, predominantly now just focusing on upcycling with my slow fashion brand. It's a startup, and that's been in the last 8 years. So within the slow fashion world, and I'm just excited to be here. And I go by the pronouns of she and her. And I will pass the mic on. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Diaz. I host a podcast called Eco Chic, a sustainable fashion podcast primarily aimed at millennial women. It really started from a place of climate science, and I got interested in sustainable fashion while I was in graduate school for climate science. I learned a lot about the pollution associated first with fashion, and then my professional work has come to work primarily in equity and energy. So I'm really interested in the people behind fashion, and I'm really excited to be here.
Hi, everyone. My name's Namuun. Greetings from Boston, Massachusetts. Currently, I work in the intersection of supply chain and sustainability, and I manage global supply chains for Heyday, a startup that helps e-commerce businesses and entrepreneurs grow. In my free time, I volunteer for Global Shapers, a youth-led WEF organization where we lead projects in our local communities around climate change and human rights. So I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for coming.
Very nice. Hello, my name is Samuel Rose. Thank you for having me. A little background on me is I started screen printing right out of high school in around 2004. And actually in high school, I did my senior project on screen printing, and that was my deep dive into fashion. It was very different back then, especially for me. And then I signed up for school and I learned cut and sew. And then that's when I really found like, now I want to dedicate my life to my craft. And that's what I did. I worked for multiple brands in the Bay Area, LA, a lot in Sacramento, where I'm headquartered. And now I run a brand, a label, which is all bespoke clothing for anyone from just the random person who walks into my shop to well-known artists. And then I do contract work for other brands. So pattern making and sample sewing and concept design and technical design. So that's like my forte. And that's a little bit about like where I'm coming from.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for organizing this, by the way, the Fashion Revolution USA team. So happy to be here. I am tuning in from New York City, and my name is Tori Curbelo. I primarily work for an organization called Lifeway Network, which combats human trafficking. I run their advocacy and education program, and it's very tied to the nonprofit that I run. That's on the smaller side that I run on my time, but it's called Fashion of Tomorrow, which focuses specifically on advocacy to address a more sustainable fashion industry and specifically engaging the general public on ways that they can take action to raise this issue with their own decision makers and legislators. And I became interested in this topic probably very young when I learned about human trafficking, and I was just astonished with how vast it was, but also how we all have an impact on this issue. It wasn't something that I could blame on another person, like a dictator or another organization, but in some way, all of the commodities that we purchase have been tainted by exploitative labor or child labor, so on and so forth. So my career after that really focused on ways of connecting the general everyday person with ways that they could take action. And I found one of the most meaningful ways for me was through an advocacy lens, instead of focusing on consumers or companies, but really tackling the structural change and bringing it to the forefront of people's attention. So kind of from my human trafficking work, I co-founded Fashion of Tomorrow, which has been just very fruitful. And so I've been involved with a number of organizations over the years, mostly in the international space, like the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, UNICEF USA. I worked for a family homeless shelter, but it all intersected with advocacy in some way, shape, or form.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Xochil Herrera Scheer, and my company is called the Chicago Pattern Maker. I'm based in the suburbs of Chicago, and I help mainly small brands, but some mid-sized brands with pattern making, product development, technical design, prototyping, kind of everything they need prior to manufacturing. I also am an adjunct faculty member at Columbia College Chicago, where I teach students in product development, and I'm a board of directors for AIBI, which is the Apparel Industry Board of Illinois, and that's a nonprofit organization kind of aimed at helping young and startup designers get their footing in the industry, use fashion labs, stuff like that. I learned to sew at a very young age, so I've always been really interested in this industry, but have always had an interest in small business and have been following Fashion Revolution since its inception. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, panelists, for introducing yourself. I'm going to dive into the questions. So my first question for you guys is, can you share how you got started in your field? And again, we can start in alphabetical order.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, how I got started is, well, in education was I did attend FIDM in San Francisco and also in Los Angeles, and I got my degree. And during that time, I actually worked for several companies, being one of them, Paper Chase and Von Terry, who I mentioned, was doing a lot of custom work. And it was really, really exciting. I do want to stress how important it is, especially for those listening that are trying to get into the fashion industry and are fairly new to it. I think confidence, tenacity, and just dedication, sheer dedication goes a long way. As you know, I said, he pretty much said, I didn't give you the job because you were the most talented. I was still in school, but I knocked on his door like 10 times, and every time he rejected me. and finally, it was somewhere around the 10th, 11th time, he said, you know what, come on up. I'm tired of you ringing this door every single time. And he goes, I'm gonna tell you straight, you are not the most talented. You're not even close. And I said, I know, this is why I'm here, because I want to learn from you. And it was for, it was a position as a first pattern maker and as an assistant. And I learned so much from him. But he said he had so many other more qualified people. But he said, if I did that much, if I put so much effort into getting that job, that he knew that that's what I would do for his company. And that was the reason he hired me. So from there, I worked in the, I actually started working in the fast fashion industry for the following 10 years. And I worked my way up, became the head designer for my Michelle Fritzy company, who is Kelwood now. And for just working in the fast fashion industry for 10 years, I saw the wastefulness, the unethical practices that really were disturbing. And that's why I shifted into sustainable fashion, becoming more of an upcycler and just focusing on the slow fashion side of it, and just trying to be as transparent as I can in what I do. I also am involved with a podcast. I do educational, instructional work for the Rain School in sustainability, entrepreneurship, and also with sustainable homes and interiors, along with being a speaker and an event curator for various organizations. So I'm really, really just thrilled to be here. And just to, I grew up on a migrant camp, and I just want to share how it is so important to always follow your dreams and to really stay focused, even if people keep telling you no, because they will. And that's what I heard all my life. And that's why I continue to look for solutions. And I have a very, very sweet spot for diversity and inclusion. And that's what I continue to push wherever I am involved with whichever organization. And I'm very active on Clubhouse, and I bring up topics that sometimes are uncomfortable for others, but it always brings people together and with solutions. And I think in our DNA, like I said, that's the name of my brand, DNA Sustainable Threads. I do believe our DNA has a solution for humanity to encompass itself and integrate with fashion. So in saying that, I'm just excited to hear and talk more with all the amazing speakers here in regards to the topic. So thank you so much. I hope I can help with other questions as well.
Thank you so much, Clementina. That's really inspiring, everything you just said. So thank you so much for giving that introduction about how you got started. And also, I resonated with that confidence thing. I think that's really important, because at my age, we don't have that as much in college because we think that we're not as good as everyone else. That's really awesome that you persevered. So with that, I'm going to move on to Laura.
I did want to add with saying that, I was very young, and what I was channeling was the difficulties my parents went through, me working in the fields, in the migrant fields, in the summers, and saying, you know what, I am deserving to be here just like everyone else. And that's really what I channeled. So in case anyone's listening, that's, you know, use whatever you need to put in your head to draw that confidence. But thank you again.
That's awesome. Okay, Laura, go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Clementina. I really love your story of taking this more cultural background and how that you've incorporated that into your career. And I love what you mentioned about confidence. I'd like to talk just a little bit about my upbringing. I grew up in Miami, Florida, to Cuban immigrant parents. My whole family still lives in Miami. People who immigrated from Cuba very infrequently left. So there is a pretty large community, and I'm very passionate about equity because I always grew up around people who were quite different than myself. I have a lot of respect for social structures around fashion and around business, more particularly, I suppose. My grandmother was a seamstress, came from Cuba with a friend, and opened a factory in Miami. And my whole life I grew up, like when my grandmother was taking care of me, took me to her factory. And I had this very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like golden idea of what it was to be in a factory, because my grandmother employed all of these other Hispanic women. And it was a place that I had a lot of really fond memories, because it was something that she was so passionate about and something that she used to really lift up her community. And then going through my academic career, I became very passionate about climate science, particularly evolution. That's my favorite. I got really into animal evolution, and then I started thinking about people, and I got interested in climate change. Also thinking about sea level rise, living in Miami, and I've lived in a few different cities across the country since then, and really gotten to better understand how people interact with climate. Especially while I was in school in Northern Arizona, I got to better understand what it means for Native communities to interact with climate change, particularly when we're talking about things like water access. When COVID hit and we're talking about making sure you wash your hands very early, it's like, okay, well, these are communities that don't even have access to running water very frequently. So how can we best assist them so that they can help themselves? So a lot of my work is motivated by equity and climate science. And then a little bit about the podcast, which is why I'm here and how I got my background in sustainable fashion and how I have kind of best gotten to know the sustainable fashion space and fashion revolution in particular is about 3.5 years ago. Again, I was in school and I realized that climate science was a topic that was quite gatekept. I was learning about a lot of topics that I felt like I should have already learned about just being a citizen of the earth. And I was like, why is no one talking about this? So there wasn't a whole lot of podcasts 3.5 years ago. I was looking for someone like myself and I didn't find it. So I was like, well, there must be other women who care about climate science, but also want to talk about things like fashion and clean beauty and these like more shallow, quote unquote, sustainability topics. And that's where the podcast was really born out of. There are a lot of resources now of how to start a podcast, but at the time it was like how to start a blog. So I just had to take some confidence and fake it till I make it. And I learned as much as I could. And I think the best thing that I have experienced through the show is inconsistency. I have been able to really establish myself with other folks in the field, and I've learned how to ask questions. So on the topic of creating a career, whether it is in sustainable fashion or in any other space, when you learn how to ask questions, you also have to learn how to really listen to someone's answers so that you can continue a conversation. And that sounds like such a basic thing to learn how to do, but it's quite difficult. So it takes practice, and it definitely has helped me in other aspects of my life. I love talking to people about their background and why they choose to do what they do. But I also think it's really important to be able to be fluid and dynamic, and you definitely know when someone is going into a conversation with some sort of outcome that they want to get across. So in short, if there is anyone interested in climate communication or climate policy and being able to interact with people on the other side of your career, a lot of it is just listening to people and listening to people's stories. And I think that has probably been the most useful career tip that was ever shown to me. So with that, I'll close out. Thank you so much again for having me. And I'm really excited to hear everyone else's stories.
Thanks, Laura. That was awesome and a really good advice, because it seems like something that's so simple, like listening, but listening is hard. It really is. And actively listening is a different thing. So that's really a useful information. Thank you. And with that, I'll move on to Namuun.
Thank you. No, that was truly inspiring, Clementina and Laura. Thanks so much for sharing your stories. So I think a little bit about me, and it really is, connected to my background. I was born and raised in Mongolia. So, although I was a urban, city kid, I did spend a lot of my summers in the country, living the traditional nomadic life with my grandparents. I was fortunate enough to get some education in English, and so as I grew older, I got opportunities to go out into the countryside, especially in off-grid communities where, I would work as a translator in a translator and assistant sort of fashion for different types of mercy groups, we call them, or nonprofit groups that would come out to the country for people that didn't have medical supplies or tools, whether that's dental checkups, things like that. And so in many ways, I did get to see really two different countries in my own country, and it really made me realize that there's this gap, and there needs to be sort of this bridge that bridges the wealth that's in these bigger cities to really the people that are in the country that were really lagging in that. And so around 17, that's when I was able to come to the US to pursue my education through a scholarship where I studied international relations and economics. Just because, again, I was really interested in how the interaction, not just within the city folks and the country folks, but also cross-cultural interaction from different groups around the world that would come to my country, how that could really create wealth and for those communities and really understand sort of that bridging process. So while in college, I was working with public organization, and I realized really the importance of private businesses and bringing impact and change in communities. It wasn't just the nonprofit world or the government. And so after college, I did pursue a role in business, and while I was looking for roles, I came upon a management consulting role where I was able to interface with many different types of people and many different business problems across different industries. And I worked specifically on procurement and sourcing problems for different industries where I honed my communication, problem solving, management skills. I really got to understand how different types of businesses worked. And this was all great, but a turning point in my life came about 3 years ago when I went back home to Mongolia for a visit. And I just remember sitting in the back seat of a cab. I was pregnant at that time, and I was just coughing profusely because at that time the city was really enveloped in smog. And that year, my city, Ulaanbaatar, was ranked the most polluted capital city in the world. I remember being really, really scared for not just my health, but for really everybody, my baby, my family. And the statistics at that time was about 1 in 10 pregnancies were unsuccessful because of the smog. So although I was really lucky and my baby was really lucky and I went home that day and I was fine, I just could not stop thinking about what can I do to alleviate these problems. And of course it brought in, I did all my reading and my research. What are the business solutions was one of the questions that I had, and from articles from the UN to the World Bank, numerous sources had all really came down to the supply chain and transportation issue and how that was really key. Although the specific issue at the time was mass urbanization, or I guess the face issue, the root cause was poor supply chain infrastructure and transportation for rural folk to sustain their life in the country. There were no jobs, nor the capacity to really scale the wealth that they had or the small businesses that people have started. And that's when I realized really just the importance of supply chain and logistics to sustainability. And fortunately was able to pursue my graduate degree in this supply chain management and sustainability. And during my schooling, I had the opportunity to work on projects spanning from supply chain transparency and traceability to workers' well-being and designing more carbon efficient networks, transportation networks for different types of industries. So again, following my interest in this newfound understanding of how integral supply chain is, as well as its importance within not just sustainability, but just business in general, I pursued a role. I was hoping to pursue a role that intersects with both of this, and I came upon a startup called Heyday, where we really help small to medium e-commerce retail businesses scale. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I manage the global procurement for that startup, and I'm super lucky to be doing it. I do think I do have a smaller sort of, maybe a shorter story, just because of the trajectory of my career and the length compared to my colleagues here, who are all very super impressive. But one thing that I would, as an advice or kind of a overall conclusion, I suppose, from my story and figuring out what I really liked and how it led me to sustainability and supply chain, is just listen to what, first of all, like what you are actually good at and your strengths, but at the same time, also listen to your heart. What do you care about and what do you actually love, and who do you care about and who do you love? For me, it was really about bridging people from the 12-year-old Namuun in rural Mongolia to about, a couple years ago when I was in the same situation in Mongolia, realizing, well, actually, I really care about small businesses. I care about wealth creation in rural communities, and how do I go about that? So I think it does change, and I think it does kind of your interest does narrow down as you get older and as you experience more things and you go through them personally and professionally. But it's all about listening to that and being courageous enough to say, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I also love. So with that, I will leave it to the next person. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Namuun. I think that your passion to take action, that one day, that totally changed your life, it seems, is really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing. And then we'll move on to Samuel.
All right. Well, listening to Namuun, it makes me almost think like how minuscule what I do is in like a whole world kind of thing, where I'm just this measly like designer, you know. But then I also take that and I'm like, okay, fashion is the most hurtful thing to this world, right? The fashion industry, not us. We're like good for it, but fashion, the waste, like the production, the hurtful things that bosses do to young people or anything, right? The workers, all that. So it kind of makes me think like how small I am, but also how much of an impact someone this in this whole grand scheme of things. So the way that I started is back in 2004, I learned how to screen print. I took a internship with some like small town screen printer, started a brand because I wanted to be my own boss. And I went to school, all these other things, but I started learning about the effects of fashion on the world. And when I was working in SF for a couple different brands, they would send me to these factories where it would be mostly Chinese, older women, one or two guys, but mainly older women. And then they would teach me, they would like bring me in, they would feed me all these other things. I would ask for a seam ripper, they'd give me like a screwdriver. It was very funny, but like it was fun and I learned so much. But then I would go to the basement and I would see these huge rooms full of garbage bags, full of waste. And then once every 6 months, they would take it to the landfill. And then learning about how the fact that those never go anywhere, they stay in the landfill, all that stuff, it kind of just it opened up my eyes to the simple fact that this small manufacturing company, you know, like two floors on Market Street, can produce that much waste. And then I think about all the other factories that are like 10 times the size of that, how much they must create. And then I think of myself and I'm like, I'm such this little thing, but I see that I can create a garbage bag of waste every week, especially if I'm cutting up, you know, if I'm like doing big jobs, I can create so much waste. So that's just kind of where I am and where I feel like maybe I feel like maybe I don't belong here compared to everyone I'm seeing, everyone else, you know, not to be like, oh, like I'm not, I'm just saying that I'm trying to do more. I've been thinking about this a long time, but now I'm at the beginning of my journey where it's like, okay, now I'm saving all my scraps and I'm not throwing anything away. If I see a leather jacket with a hole in it, I'm making something out of it, whether it be like hats or a bag, or I'm patching it. I do a lot of patching now. I do a lot of cutting up of like old jackets with like moth holes or whatever. I try not to let anything go to waste. I don't, if I'm tearing stuff up, I'm keeping the zippers, I'm keeping the buttons, keeping as much as possible, especially if it's vintage, right? Like those vintage zippers are like hard to come by and they're beautiful and they work way better for some reason. But that's just to say, because we don't make stuff like we used to, you know, and we just don't care about quality. And I come from lower middle class, Sacramento. I didn't learn about quality until I was like in fashion school, and I went on field trips. The only place Sacramento has for quality high-end fashion is Nordstrom's, and my mom never took me to more. We were more Mervyn's. When I felt the first like high quality like cotton, it was Old Navy. So that's saying like where I'm coming from, Sacramento, small town, not a lot of money in my family, and now I'm still on that mission of trying to educate Sacramento on like not buying fast fashion. Like not only is fast fashion like horrible for the world, but it's also like my competition because I make one-off clothing, and why would you spend 150 on like a shirt I make compared to $25 on a Zara shirt or whatever? So like I'm like battling, I'm in the beginning of my little battle of like internal, like I want to make money, and then it's also like to survive, but it's also like I see the effects like firsthand. Like I've worked for so many companies who just throw stuff away, you know, and it's like, so that's kind of where I'm at. Like that's a little bit of my like why I'm here, but mainly I'm here like almost as like a viewer. I'm like here to learn as well, and I hope that I get asked the right questions so I can say the right thing, but I'm here like learning from you ladies, and yeah, I don't even know, that's it, yeah.
Thank you so much, Samuel. That was perfect, everything you just said. And also, if I could speak on behalf of all of us, people like you are what people like us that need in our fields and our passions and stuff to go around. And I think that's really cool that you were saying, not only are you teaching us all of this, but you're learning from everyone else just the same. So thank you so much. And with that, I will pass it on to Tori.
Yeah. And Sam, unless you paid someone to be on the panel, you definitely deserve to be here. So don't worry about that. But yeah, a little bit about my background. I'm 3 generations from New York. My grandparents are from Puerto Rico. And I was raised in a very like social justice conscious household. In fact, when I was very young, my parents took in 3 foster siblings, which are just like my siblings till this day. So I learned very early to just coexist with folks that were different from me. And my mom was always a social worker, still is. And that really inspired me to have empathy for others. I think that's probably one of my top traits, but it really resonated with me what Clementina said, because I think for me, I just tried to work as hard as possible. I had certain goals in mind, one of which was to work specifically on human trafficking. I was really, really concerned with that issue, as well as other intersectional issues as well. And I felt like I was getting pressured that I couldn't quite make it into a field that I was interested in. And I feel like throughout the years of just taking on random opportunities, random projects that seemed boring or tedious, I feel like someone did end up taking a chance on me. And that was when I was interning for UNICEF USA. And I wanted specifically to work on their in trafficking program, but my boss really liked my work. She actually asked me to stay on a little bit longer than I was hoping. And I asked her before I left if she could facilitate a connection for me to intern with that program. So she said, okay, no problem, of course. So that person met with me and she said, I won't take you on unless you have a project in mind. So I kind of had to think on my feet. But then what I know in retrospect is that she heard such great things that she was willing to have this conversation. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I could do a podcast, because at the time, Serial was really popular. I don't know if y'all remember that. But it was totally just kind of something I was thinking about doing if I had the opportunity, and I was in that opportunity for a very, very long time. But she was like, no, what would you do if I hired you right now? So she was like, that's an awesome idea. It's innovative and a great way to get the education out, and it complements our mission. So I appreciate you thinking about that. And then with her, when she got me on to supporting her project, I started taking on little opportunities. At first, she had me just supporting, like developing the trainings, but not leading them. And I asked if I could practice in front of her, and she loved it so much. She was like, you can go to the UN with one of our staff members and co-train with them. And then I ended up going full time. So everything kind of had a domino effect after that. But it wasn't overnight. It took a lot of years before I really got there. And then so fast forward, I was at UNICEF USA and supporting on a number of projects, not just trafficking, but one of them was advocacy. And I met my co-founder of Fashion of Tomorrow, and she also worked in politics. She was the chief of staff for a congressional candidate, and she worked for Style End, which is a sustainable fashion company. And we both noticed just a huge gap in the advocacy to push sustainable fashion. And we're like, hey, we've seen a model for advocacy that works here well at UNICEF USA. And she had volunteered with a number of other organizations. And we're like, why don't we just take what we saw and implement that in sustainable fashion? And then fast forward 3 years later, and we've been running and loving it, and we just want to grow it even more. So I'm glad that I stuck with it, because I think over the years I had a lot of doubt if it was even feasible to pursue something that I was actually interested in, because I did get a lot of no's throughout those years. I did get people that dissented. I remember even like as a college student, we were talking about jobs that we'd want, and people were like, oh, the UN, like that's that's not feasible, maybe like in 40 years. And so that's what was like in my head. But at the same time, I was like, you know what, I'll try to make it feasible. And then literally a couple of years later, I was conducting briefings at the United Nations. So it's definitely possible. So I would definitely encourage, it's important to be realistic, but at the same time, not to kind of, how do you say, like, just sell yourself short and just take on the first opportunity that comes your way. Really try to visualize where you want to go and what might be the steps to get there and who you could better connect with, I think is like my best advice from my learnings.
Thanks so much, Tori. That's really inspiring. That's awesome that you, like all of you, have taken action so much, you know, to get to the places where you wanted to be and you know what you want. So that's really awesome. Okay, and last but not least, Xochil.
First of all, I'm just like in awe of everyone's stories. I think it's amazing to hear from everyone and to learn from each other. Something I really value is just being a lifelong learner. I don't consider myself an expert in anything. It's like I want to soak up what's out there in the world. And so thank you everyone for your stories. I got my start young, kind of interested in sewing. My grandmother taught me how to sew when I was 7. And so I've always had an appreciation for like the craft of, you know, making clothes. I also grew up kind of not poor, but like lower middle class, and, you know, sewing my own clothes was the way that I could, you know, get clothes that I wanted. I grew up in the Midwest in Madison, Wisconsin, and my dad worked in construction. My mom had her own business cleaning houses. And yeah, it was just, you know, things I could do to learn about making stuff or taking something I had and taking it apart, remaking it, that kind of thing, was really how I discovered, I don't know, how my love for pattern making, even before I realized that pattern making was even a job. So in high school, I ran out of classes. My high school had one sewing class, and I ran out of classes to take in sewing. So I started taking community college courses in sewing, pattern making, and I was the youngest one there. It was me and like retired women taking this class, but it was a really cool experience. I got to learn about, you know, fitting on different bodies of different ages and sizes and things like that. And then I moved to Chicago for my actual college career, went to the Illinois Institute of Art, studied fashion design. And at that point in time, I was like, oh, I might go into costumes. I might go into like, I want to be a designer. But once I was there and took pattern making classes and really understood like the problem solving aspect was what inspired me and like what got me going. And also that I just also discovered a lot of my classmates, even though they're like sketching and designing, weren't really into that like technical side. So I felt like I really found my niche there. So after college, I knew I wanted to work in small business. And so I pursued that versus like a lot of people were moving to New York or LA and kind of abandoning Chicago area in the Midwest. But I wanted to stay and work in small business. I knew that one day I would open my own business. I wasn't sure what it would be yet, but I worked as a tailor. It was like semi-retail, semi-design, but I worked as like a tailor. I restyled garments. So people would bring in like a bridesmaid's dress or like a vintage thing from their grandma, and I would take it apart, reimagine it, make it into something brand new, which was a lot of fun. And also a good way to like, as you dissect a garment and take it apart, like a good way to figure out how to make garments be really well made as well. In 2009, I found myself at the, without a job, because a lot of people were losing jobs at that point in time. The company I worked for was downsizing and eventually closed. And I was kind of at a crossroads of, do I like go find a retail job and kind of figure that out? Or I really wanted to pursue doing pattern making and like freelance work. So I decided take a chance and do that. I had taken on like 1 or 2 freelance projects for people at that time and loved it. So I went for it and just started going to every single networking event. AIBI, which I mentioned at that time, I wasn't on the board. I was like, basically fresh out of school, and I just went to like, they had speed networking, they had seminars, they had all kinds of things. I would attend everything there. Fashion Group International is another organization that I went to all their events, and I would just meet people and talk to people and tell them like, oh, I can help you with this, I can help you with that. Spent a ton of time, you know, driving myself around Chicago with the brands that I was working with, or many of them startups or in the startup phase of business, and driving to factories, meeting with the cutter, doing fittings, and then like staying after to like talk with the seamstress and like figure out how to make my patterns better. So I think all of those different experiences and meeting people, like working in the factories and seeing what that's like, as well as obviously the small batch and small businesses that I was working with, really steered my interest into like sustainability and labor rights. So that's something I still keep in mind, like to this day, as I'm working with primarily small businesses or businesses that have, you know, been around for only a few years and have goals of being sustainable, working, you know, in ethical factories, but then might not know the questions to ask or what to look for, or even in their design process, you know, things I can suggest as a pattern maker to help them with those goals, whether it's changing seams to get a better yield of the fabric, or adding in an accessory item to use like the waste, the scrap waste, in a more intelligent way. You know, designing, you know, collections and styles where you're utilizing the fabric in more than one garment so that you can have, like, reduce the waste in that as well. And still spending lots of time talking with and visiting factories and encouraging my clients, whether they're working with someone local, which is always my favorite thing, working local to them, so they can go and see the factory and talk to the sewers and like really get in it. But even if they can't, like, you know, obviously we can get on Zoom and do factory tours virtually, and but making them aware of like questions they can ask, things to look for as they're, you know, seeing their factory, whether it's in person or virtual, and how to have better relationships. As a teacher, I think of myself more as like a mentor. I definitely want to help students, whether they're finding internships or jobs, but to, again, ask those questions and make our industry better. I know a lot of students might not have like the luxury of choosing the company they're going to apply to lots of different companies. They might end up in, you know, a fast fashion company, even if that's not their, you know, ultimate goal, but you got to get a job. So I think there's ways we can all have impact, even within those organizations that we want to get away from, but we can, you know, help from the inside to direct change. So yeah, I think asking lots of questions, being involved, and putting yourself out there is probably like the best way to move forward.
Totally. I think communication and networking, that's really true. Everything you said, it seems to prove so helpful because that really showed you exactly what you wanted to do. So that's really awesome. And there's a common theme with all of you guys doing that and taking action and figuring out what you want to do. So it's really awesome. And so with that, thank you all for answering those questions. We're going to move on to our second question. So what are your thoughts on internships, and what advice would you give to someone looking to get work experience? So we can start again with Clementina.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question. I know in the UK, internships are banned as far as unpaid internships. I know in the US in 2012, I have the fashion law documents here, which had that I'm not going to name the companies, but the ones that were under that lawsuit, and what it came across as there is a certain criteria. I'll share those resources so that it could be shared on the panel. But there is that gray space where you can have someone that's an intern, qualified, doing all these jobs that are really considered entry level. You really need to consider, and the companies, I think they've been waffling a lot on whether they want to keep someone as an unpaid intern or keeping them as an entry level. And it's a very a very gray area because the way the laws are right now, it's not defined clearly. And I do think that in regards to individuals, if they're seeking internships, I think it's important to get a lot of clarity from the company that they're thinking about working for. Make sure it's in writing, making sure that the description of their duties is very clear. And if it appears to be something that you would say is entry level, I would definitely question that, because unfortunately, the fashion industry has been notoriously known for taking advantage of individuals that are either in college or right out of college. And it's important to know your rights, and it's important to know what you're going to get out of it. If you're getting compensation, you know, it is important to get it in writing, because, you know, many times I mean, it's happened to myself and many people. I mean, I'm sure all of us have heard stories where someone's working for a year as an intern and they still haven't gotten paid. Most of it, you know, there's usually 30 to 60 days. I've worked as an intern for many companies in the beginning of my career. And I think it is important to select, if you are going to be an intern, if you're going to be especially an unpaid intern, that you work for companies that you know are dream jobs, and they're going to definitely get you a step in. And I, of course, would not be working for, I would not suggest one that's probably not going to benefit you at all. If anything, seek those jobs that are truly going to boost your employment possibilities once you finish the internship. But ideally, it would be something in writing that should say that after a certain amount of time, hopefully a lot shorter span, that you will be hired as a part-time or full-time employee. And also there's internships that help with your education. You know, there are larger corporations, companies that provide help with that. And as we all know, student loans are very expensive. So just do a lot of research, diligent research in regards to internships. But it is a very gray area, because if those internships are not available, then for those that don't have the experience, that's the best way to get in the door in the fashion industry. And I know that's how I got in, because I was able to apply to those internships, the ones that I knew were going to benefit me. And just networking, completely networking, and finding those dream internships, whether they're paid or unpaid. But I'm sure someone on the panel is probably better in regards to the law and how that can be implemented in and going forward. And I'm excited about the fashion bill that's coming up, because the fashion bill, I think, might also have more transparency in regards to that as well. So that's something that I could also add a resource for. But thank you so much for asking, Mrs. Clementina. I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Clementina. That's really helpful advice, especially for me, because I'm just 20, so I'm figuring out all of that stuff, particularly right now. So thank you for sharing. All right, so we'll move on to Laura.
Thank you. Well, similarly to Clementina, I do not believe in unpaid internships. I believe that people should be paid fairly for their work and expertise. And particularly in the fashion industry, that is a notoriously hard field to get a paid entry-level position fresh out of college. I remember in undergrad, I had a couple of girlfriends who moved from North Carolina to New York City for unpaid internships after college with their degrees. And they were unpaid for 6+ months. And when they did get paid, it was not enough to live in New York City. So I have a lot of strong feelings about unpaid internships. I think that if you're in a position to hire interns, I've been in positions before where I have to really convince people that it's worth paying interns. And that's really, really unfortunate. Unpaid internships, just to kind of close off on that topic, is they continue this cycle of the wealthy being at the top of the food chain. The kids who can afford to take unpaid internships are the kids who don't necessarily need to take that time taking paid part-time work that is not necessarily adding to their career, quote unquote, experience. So I think there's a lot of ethical reasons, not just about paying people for their work, but also just the wealth gap in America and why we see the wealth gap the way it is. Unpaid internships are a big part of that. So I have a lot of feelings about that. If you're in a position to hire someone, pay them. That's just my personal stance. And then I think that the internships or like long-term career experiences that really helped me get to where I am, both professionally and personally, were typically adjacent to academic experiences. Like there was a lot of, like I mentioned, I work in climate policy. There was a lot of opportunity for me in school to work adjacent to local governments and more like project focused work as opposed to day-to-day intern tasks of maybe data entry or filing or things like that. If there was a project that the local government needed some help on, I was very fortunate to be able to contribute to that kind of more on a freelance level. So I think that's also a really cool way to experience an internship and get some academic exposure to something without necessarily showing up to an office 3 days a week without getting paid. So a little bit different and quite situational depending on your field. But I also want to say that, like Clementina said, a lot of internship and early career work is based on networking. I think that something that's really powerful that has helped me professionally that I don't know if enough people do is informational interviews. People love to talk about themselves. And if there's someone in a field that you find on LinkedIn that you're really interested in learning about what they do, don't feel bad about emailing them and say, can I take 10, 15 minutes of your time to just talk to you about how you got to where you are? And people will typically take longer because, again, people love to talk about themselves. And again, just listening and being able to ask the right questions and seeing how they got to where they are. There are not that many people that have totally linear career paths. No one wakes up at 18 years old and like knows what they're going to do for the rest of their life. So being able to make those connections and learn from people and learn from their mistakes, they will also be far more inclined to kind of point you in the right direction or shoot things your way. And don't be scared to ask too. When you're looking for a job, there's no harm in telling your friends and telling your network saying, I'm looking for a career in X, Y, and Z. If you hear of anything, send it my way. And just being really upfront with your intentions in your circles.
Thanks so much, Laura. And I also really thought it was great that you pointed out like the economic disparities in like involved with all of that. So yeah, thank you so much. And I will move on to Namuun.
Great. No, yeah, I'm not for unpaid internships either, but I feel like we've talked about that topic, so I'll move on to other things. But I do feel strongly about unpaid internships, that we should never ever do them. Well, I would say in regards to internships, like they're great, right? Like for me specifically, were really important for my career. You know, prior to college, during college, you know, after college, like you could also be doing part-time internships while you're also pursuing like a full-time job. So depending on, you know, what you want to do and where you want to land, I think internships are a great way to get your foot in the door, and really in any industry, really. And it also provided me with what I like and what I didn't like, or what I perceived that I would like, and really being able to figure out, okay, actually, this is not what I wanted to do, or actually, I'm not really great at this, and or these are my weaknesses, and you know, if I just do this next thing, maybe I, you know, this is how I can grow and overcome certain weaknesses. So in terms of finding internships, I think some of us have already mentioned it here. Coffee chats, networking, really important. I really do stand for informational interviews. I think what you can do during those calls is really being able to glean information on what you can contribute to their organization if you were to intern there. And that's one of the things you could glean from a conversation like that. And I think that's really important because a lot of the times, you know, you want to work for, if you know you want to work for a specific organization, you don't really know how you would fit there in your current level or in where you are in your current skill set. It's really important to see if they have a specific project or you know, specific, you know, 1 month or 2 month thing that you could be contributing to, or a long-term thing of a component, right, that you could be contributing to. So like an example I have is actually during this past year, I was working with, I guess, one of an outdoor, well, sustainability focused outdoor apparel company. And we were really looking at opportunities and solutions to create a crisis fund for workers in their supply chain. And this topic was like really complex and it's quite new. There's not a lot of crises funds coming from businesses for their workers in their supply chain. So quite new, and there was a lot of research that needed to be done. And by the time that I, you know, had to do something else and I was leaving that project, you know, we weren't done, right? So one of the ideas that we brought up was like, actually, we could hire an intern. And although the interns, we had already put down job description as X, Y, and Z, this could be an add-on if they're interested, because this would, they could really contribute, especially somebody with research skills or somebody with project management skills could really help finish the research, or even then help roll it out, depending on the length of that internship. So really look for opportunities, talk to people in the companies and organizations you're interested in, and understand what they're doing, what their situation is, what their hurdles are, any obstacles that they're facing. Ask those interesting questions and you'll probably find something that you will also be interested in doing too. And then jump for that opportunity. So that's one. And then the other thing that I experienced, and I've also kind of learned throughout the years, is don't just look locally. And I know a lot of us will have to be, constrained by our location, whether that's family or other circumstances. But if you do have that flexibility, also seek outside your local location, I suppose, and be open and courageous to opportunities just outside the box. So I guess maybe an example that I have was I ended up interning for an Indonesian social enterprise a while back, and it all had to do with life-saving technologies that provided off-grid folks with like sustainable power and clean water. This was initially not my plan for that summer, and I was actually one of the first cohort of interns for that organization. So they didn't really have an established program either. So that was another thing that I wasn't really planning on. And I really thought it was a risk, because all my friends in college at that time they were doing internships in New York City or some other large city with very mature organizations that had legacy internship programs. And I really thought it was a risk that I was taking, but this really changed my course in my career. The way that I saw was that that was the internship that showed me how business can be impactful. And it wasn't necessarily politics or government and sort of the other things that I thought, was equally important to me at that time. But I realized my interest in this other topic, and it really just opened another door. And it allowed me to transition into my next role. And, just because of this experience. So I really encourage everybody to really think outside the box. Sometimes a job description and sometimes a location are things that we might shy away from in the first glance, but really think it through and think about, what are the other aspects besides those undesirables that really could help with your skill sets or your or the experiences that you're looking for. And then advice on making the most out of an internship or job that's not your dream job. I do have two things here. I think one is transferable skills. Like there are loads wherever you go, whatever you do. Don't be down if you do not get that dream job or that internship, like I didn't. For that Indonesian social enterprise. I learned loads of transferable skills that really went beyond just that job that summer, but every other summer, every other year, some that I'm still using on a day-to-day basis, whether that's leading, managing others, teaching, coaching, negotiating, presenting, learning how to use PowerPoint, just like from the very basic things and skills all the way to maybe really find skills that you wouldn't have otherwise have been able to do on the job and have been able to present it on your resume, I suppose. So you learn lots of transferable skills no matter where you go. And I think the second piece is that you do not need to have a specific title to do what you would like to accomplish or learn at a job. Don't just look for the desirable titles you want, whether that's sustainability intern or fashion intern or apparel intern, whatever title that you're really looking for in an internship or job. Don't just go for that. Although, it would be ideal, it's always possible to bring your passion, your interest to the role. When you really care for something and you want to learn something, you can make it happen. And I think just sharing your goals, your interests with your manager, or whoever you work with at that time, and finding a way together to help weave those interests into your experiences is certainly possible. So those are some thoughts I had when you asked that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namuun. Something I really loved that you said, and I know that Lauren Clementina said as well, is like not just trying to prove to the company that you're worth something, but also realizing like, oh, wait, what do I want and what do I deserve? I feel like, at least speaking on my behalf, and I know a lot of other students, I look at internship opportunities and I'm like, I don't think I'm good enough for that. But you can look at it the other way around. Like maybe I need to see if they're good enough for me, you know, and my personal goals and strengths and everything. So thank you so much for that. All right, so we'll continue with Samuel.
My bad. I don't know why I couldn't figure that out. So internships, I really, I don't know. I rarely use the word internship, and I don't know. I usually use apprenticeship. I don't know the different. Well, I guess I know. I feel like internship is student level, or it's like learning, where apprenticeship is more training. Apprenticeship, and I think Xochil and Clementina can agree. I've never been asked for my degree. I've never asked to been shown, like, show someone my degree in fashion design. Like, it is because of my skills that I get hired or not hired, or tenacity or whatnot. But still, like, in the very end, if it's coming to like a salary, then it comes to my skills. And I've never ever been. So with that being said, you don't even have to go to school. You just have to learn the skills and network. And that's what school does. It gives you the network and it gives you the skills. But if you can find that somewhere else, then you're good. And that somewhere else could very well be an apprenticeship with me. Paid apprenticeships versus non-paid, it's so hard. And now I'm talking as a business owner and not as that student who was like, hell yeah, give me the opportunity to sit with you for 20 minutes a day for free. I don't care. Let me soak in some of your knowledge and let me go somewhere else, because I don't have a contract with you and you don't have a contract with me, and we're open. And then I become your friend and you become like a big bro to me or big sis. And now to this day, I still call some of my old mentors and I'm like, Cecilia, how do I make a costume? I just did like a weird ass costume, comic book hero costume. And I did my first time. So I call my mentor, my old mentor from 8 years ago, I think. And I called her and she didn't pay me, but she taught me so much. I should have paid her, right? And if you look at like history, like shoemakers and stuff, a family would drop a young person off at a shoemaker and then pay the shoemaker to teach the person how to make the shoes. So it's like, it's very interesting on that behalf. And now I'm talking, that's like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Things have changed. The economy has changed, but I have so much to share with people, young people, people who were in my position 8 years ago. So it's such a hard thing. Like, I go back and forth constantly where it's like, okay, I can pay this person $15 an hour and I'm teaching them, right? So it's very hard. It's very hard for me to come up with like a sustainable, to sustain my company, and then also pay someone who is really not doing, no offense. It's so hard, because when people tell me you should get an intern, I'm like, dude, it's so hard. It's gonna take months and months to get them to the point where I feel comfortable paying them without losing so much. It's such a hard thing that I'm going through right now. So this might be the best question of the whole thing, because I'm trying to learn, and I'm looking at the laws and the link that Clementina said that Christy put on. And then I'm also reminded of the fact that like LA just banned, or California, I think, banned per piece payments. And that's like how I get by, because it's so hard to pay. Because now I pay two of my apprentices, and now I have two that are like working their way up to being paid, because I'm teaching them so much and they're not to the point where I could actually make money by also paying them, right? If I pay them $15 an hour and then they produce, I don't know if I'm sounding like a jerk right now, and then they produce, you want to Did you have something to say, Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's really interesting and important that you're making a distinction between having an intern that you're teaching something versus having someone that's just doing work for free. So I think that's the big difference between paid and unpaid. Just if you are not paying someone, it's because you are actively teaching them something. It's not because they are doing any sort of low-level filing work or like email responses for you.
Totally. Oh yeah, yeah. And if I'm having them organize my buttons, you know that I'm paying them hourly. Like I'm not like you're not learning anything from me by like helping me fold my fabric. So of course I'm gonna pay you. And I'll teach you as well, because as we go through the fabric, I'm like, that's a worsted wool, that's linen, that's blended, right? So all that stuff. But also I feel like it is that chicken before the egg. It's like you come out of school and yeah, you know some of the technical skills, but my school taught me so little when it comes to the simple fact that knits take a different seam allowance than wovens, you know, and I needed to go and work to find that out. And I was lucky enough that I dedicated my life, and I was in a position to where I was able to move back with my parents, and I didn't take any jobs, like no Starbucks, no retail jobs. Well, I had retail jobs, but out of college, I was like, no, screw this. I'm not gonna live like a cool life. I'm gonna go and live with my parents out in like some weird town in Northern California, and I'm just gonna focus. And I took my internships there. So it was kind of weird. They were apprenticeships, but I am like very much battling that. But the way my apprenticeships work is usually it's a person who comes into my shop. They talk to me about everything, and then they usually like 7 out of 10 times they say, can I take a class with you? And I say, how about this? Come in 1 day a week for a month, and I'll teach you things. And then it'll be your way of me giving back, because Sacramento is like my heart. I love Sacramento. I left for a little while, but I came back because I want to be a stepping stone for Sacramento. I know that I have the opportunity to be here, but if I can help people, they can be here. See, I'm like out of the screen now. It's like that, like Sacramento, like Bay Area is already what it is. New York, like if you can make it anywhere, whatever that's saying, but Sacramento has nothing for these young kids. And I know because that was me. I had to go to SF to find two of my mentorships. So I am very much battling, because I am one of the only opportunities for some of these young designers to learn real industry, real like skills. That's not like how to make an oven mitt or like all these things. It's like, no, if you want to make a pair of trousers and grade them and then get a marker made, which is terms that people in school really don't know. They don't learn those. Like I don't think I knew what a marker was right out of college. Like it just wasn't taught to me. So internships or apprenticeships are so important for designers, not necessarily for the business side or whatever, but for me, I don't think I would be able to do what I do without like being able to just sit behind someone and just watch them for like a day or two. So is it a double-edged sword? I think that's the saying. And like, it's true. Like you in this realm of my realm of fashion, experience trumps all. Like forget about your degree, all that. If you have experience and you have the eye and that kind of stuff, then like I think that you'll be all right. So it's hard, but apprenticeships, I'm all about it. But make sure you're getting what you deserve out of it, for sure, whether that's knowledge or money. So
awesome. Thank you, Samuel. Those are interesting perspectives, because it really depends on the industry and like the position that you're in to talk about this. So thank you. So we'll move on to Tori, and also not to rush you, ladies, but we are running a little bit out of time, and we want to have enough time for Q&A. But please feel free to give as much information, but just maybe to condense it just a tad bit. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I think my answer to this question, and of course I work mostly for nonprofits throughout my short career, so it's a little different than a company, but yeah, after listening to all this, I definitely want to put some caveats into what I'm saying. I think I would like at first I would have answered it like, yes, internships are awesome. But I think also it's probably because I remember my most recent internships, and I think not all internships were created equal. I remember probably one of my first ones being put in a really unsafe situation, and they kind of tried to be like, no, you have to, if you don't do that, you're not being cooperative, you're not willing to go the extra mile. But that was like a learning experience about what type of internships I wanted to take on. So I think they're great opportunities. I would worry that if like unpaid internships went away, that they would just be relabeled volunteer opportunities. I know that's like people would find a new way to just relabel it. So but I agree with everything that's been said. I'm definitely anti-exploitation and all of that. But yeah, so I think that internships can be a really vital opportunity, just because especially some topics that you might be interested are very broad, like sustainable fashion. That's great that you're interested in that, but like, how do you want to tackle that? I was specifically like interested in international relations. Like you could be a fundraiser, you could be a communications person, you could like support corporations. It can go on to like so many different angles, and which one you fit into can take like really just trying things out. And I think one of the nice things about internships are that they are very short term. They should be short term anyways. If you're an intern for 3 years, there's something wrong with that. But I think it's great that you have the flexibility after like 3 months, 6 months to be like, okay, that was great, but that wasn't for me. Whereas like if you take on an entry level job, it will look weird if you leave very quickly. You should have some sustainability in your resume. So if you're bouncing around too much in jobs, that might not look that great. And I think that also it's nice because it should be a mutual experience. So if it is very administrative heavy, I don't think that's the best internship, especially it depends on your level of education, where you're coming from. So I think the nice thing is that you can propose projects that you want to work on, like specific skills. Whereas if you take on a job very early on in your career, they don't want to hear it that much. They have specific things that you need to do, and that's your job. And you can always try to request things, but you won't have as much time as like an internship where also it's your opportunity, and you can say like, well, I also need to get something out of this because it is an internship, I should be learning. So I think that's the great thing. So I would definitely recommend it. I remember when I was taking on internships, I remember my cousin being like, you really need to take on a paid opportunity, or you really need to get a job, and I was like, well, I want to learn different things. And they were a lot of them were really, really fun. Some of them were really, really random. I remember like taking phone calls at like a city council office as one of the many, many tasks that they had me doing. And it would be funny, the calls that we would get, like people complaining that the helicopters fly too low and we need to do something about that. So it was really, I have a lot of great memories from, and it also like helped me in any job that I ever took on, because some of the stuff was just so interesting that I was able to calm down, and not like anything that comes my way now, I don't fully panic. I'm like, okay, I've seen that in some way, shape, or form in my past, and I feel like I can handle it or figure it out or work with someone to figure it out. But I got a lot of that out of the way in those settings where I could just learn about different stuff. So that was really fun. So yeah, I think it really depends on like the type of internship you're looking for, and making sure it's a good company and how they treat interns, because I feel like some people respect their interns, they understand what it should be. But if it's just if the culture is, oh, that's our intern, we'll just have our intern collect the coffees, or it's that they're just an intern, if that's their mentality, that's going to affect your experience quite a bit. So I think really trying to see when you're interviewing or asking around, I'm really trying to pick up on the culture, and that might also really determine if that's a good opportunity for you. But I would say overall, I would definitely try to do something of that nature, like a volunteer opportunity, an internship. When I'm looking at people's resumes for the few things I've hired for, I treat internship opportunities as valuable experience.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to Xochil.
So I also agree that internships are extremely valuable, and especially like Samuel said, like from the technical and like development side of fashion, it's so hands-on, and they're skills that you learn in the industry that there's just no time to learn it in school. There's no way that instructors, as good as they might be, can give you the wealth of knowledge in, a short period of time. So going into, an apprenticeship type situation, I think is really valuable for the student or young person going into that position. And as a business owner, I know like I agree 100% with Samuel. It's like you're giving so much of yourself, your experience, your expertise. It's a two-way street. I think the most important thing in life, in business, in any of these situations is setting up clear boundaries in the beginning. And so I think an unpaid internship, if it's more of a hands-on experience type thing, is totally acceptable, but you don't want to be doing that, like Tori was saying, for like 3 years. That's insane. But if you're setting this up as like, oh, it's for 90 days, or this is for my, semester during school, and then there's an end point, and you're also setting up like goals of things that you want to learn or take out of the internship, I think those are acceptable situations. Obviously, when you're interning for, let's say, like a larger corporation or someone that has money, and the types of tasks that you're being given are things that they should be paying an assistant or entry-level person to do, those are not situations that are acceptable to just be like, oh yeah, I'll go on my coffee run or go, pick up the mail and stuff like that. You want to definitely be gaining valuable knowledge and experiences from that, and not just be, sitting there to put it on your resume. I think there's a clear difference. I know it's hard for students to discern sometimes, but I think asking questions and making sure it's a learning experience and not just a way for the company to get free labor. It has to go both ways and be, mutually beneficial. So yeah, just setting up boundaries, set up goals. Maybe it's something where you're approaching, especially in a small design company, they might not need or hire interns or advertise for it, but if you approach them and you say, I follow your company, I really like what you're doing, I'd love to learn more about XYZ, and you tell them their goals and what you can bring to the table, but also what you want to learn, I think those can turn into really valuable opportunities. So don't stop with just like what's out there being advertised or what your college counselor might be recommending to you, but kind of seek out things that are interesting and valuable to you for your career goals.
Awesome, thank you. That's really helpful advice. Clementina, if you have a question you want to ask?
I just wanted to add to the conversation, because I've been in the industry for over 20 years. And what I want to say is, I think it's very important to really, really just look into it, do your research, and use your gut feelings on whether the company, especially when it comes to unpaid internships, because I do have to say that a lot of my early experiences was based on my gut, my intuition. And I honestly got more out of the unpaid internships than the paid internships. And the reason being is like my unpaid internships was like 10 hours a week. And I would work in conjunction with a paid job. So I was going to school, doing my paid job, which was anywhere from 15 to 20 hours a week, and then my 10 hours of an unpaid internship. But I made sure that those 10 hours, I got the most valuable information. I got all this networking information, and I just picked everyone's brains on how to further my education, where I needed to go. So at the end, I actually felt like I got a lot more than what they were getting, because I wanted to make sure that who I worked for, it was going to be a stepping stone, but it was also going to be extremely beneficial for me. And I think by the time I got done with the internship, which was like I think it was like 2.5, 3 months, they were probably so glad that I left because I was in every department and I was trying to find out as much as I could. So I just really think it's important to listen to your intuition and make sure it's a safe space, because the industry is also notoriously known for being unsafe. And I had, in my early career, I was in situations that were very unsafe. And, you know, and it's hard for others to advocate for you because there's hardly any laws in place for us in the fashion industry. So that's just what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Clementina. Namuun, you want to go ahead? Also, sorry, just a quick reminder, we do want to have some room for the audience. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, just a quick note, and I did put it on the chat. Like Samuel said, not a lot of small businesses or, you know, or even organizations like nonprofits have the pool of resources to always take interns. So if you really are interested in an organization, there are resources out there that you could look for funding for that summer, for those 3 months, you know, if you find that really valuable for your career and for your learning. So definitely look out for opportunities. I know some colleges and some universities have funding for certain students for certain fields, specifically in the arts, if you wanted to pursue that sort of unpaid internship route at a specific organization.
Awesome, thank you. Laura, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just a quick kind of tip that helped me. Xochil, you made some great comments about like checking in with your goals, and Namuun earlier said the value of some internships is also teaching you what you don't want to do. And something that was really helpful for me, that I don't know who told me this, but now I, in the opportunities that I've had to host interns, have passed this tip along to them. And that's to just keep a journal if you're in an internship, and once a month say like, what have I learned recently and what do I want to learn? And making sure that you are progressing in your career, because maybe this isn't something that you want to continue, but what did you learn and how do you want to use that experience moving forward? So just like constantly checking in with your goals as an intern is also super valuable.
Amazing, thank you guys. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to open up questions for the audience. So if any of the audience members wants to raise their hand, like virtually, or just unmute themselves, please feel free to do so at the time.
Hi, my name's Sarah. First, thank you all for doing this panel today. All this information has been so helpful. I just graduated college and I've done like a lot of internships and like kind of am trying to figure out what direction I want to go in. But I think something I'm having a hard time with, I've done a lot of internships like within the fashion industry, but like more on like the luxury side and like merchandising. And I really do want to pivot more towards like a sustainable fashion industry. But I guess if you guys have advice on like tangible places to really like find those jobs, because I feel like on LinkedIn, things like that, I'm finding like a lot of more the like fast fashion, the luxury jobs, but like having a difficult time finding more of like smaller companies or like sustainable brands. And like, so if you have any advice for just like looking out for those opportunities.
Panelists, feel free to unmute yourself if anyone feels comfortable answering.
Yeah, I have a suggestion. It would be to not wait necessarily for a posting. And I did, like, even in grad school, I did internships. So it didn't end for me in college. And I think those were the better ones that really launched my career, and where I got actual like job offers. But also something I did was look at organizations that I do like and say like, this is what I'm willing to do. Would you be willing to have the internship? So the internship, for instance, with the end trafficking project, that wasn't something that they had posted. It was something that I wanted to do, and someone facilitated a connection, and that's how the podcast. And then I kind of outlined different things that I could see myself working on. And I think that's really that really like shows initiative. It shows you're thinking, it shows you're innovative. So, and you can carve it out more for yourself as well, instead of letting someone else determine it for you. And I think a lot of people might be receptive to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I
think you have to go and look for it. I think be like super humble about it and just like put it on your Instagram. Who is a sustainable brand you like? And then if someone answers it, look into that brand. The way that I found two of my apprenticeships were that I reached out to them. I reached out to people who weren't even companies. One of my first ones, it was just a designer that I found an article on in the SF in San Francisco. I don't even know. She was just like, she had just graduated like maybe 5 years prior. So she wasn't necessarily like a brand, but she taught me so much. So I guess like, I totally agree with Clementina. I think that the smaller brands can almost teach you more because they're allowing you to go into all these different places. So don't be afraid of the smaller brands. I think they can do a lot for you.
I would also echo that, like, pitch yourself idea, like reach out to a company that you might be interested in, even if they're not hiring for something specific at the moment. Like, say, this is what I could help you with, or I've been following your brand and I noticed this, and this is something I'd love to work with you on. Would you consider a freelance position? And start from there. If you're comfortable, pitching it as an internship or an apprenticeship, do that. But I think coming at it from a freelance thing, and that could grow into a more permanent position in the future, or even if not, it gives you, again, more good experience to launch into the next stepping stone in your career.
I would say also build relationships with some of these small brand owners. You will find that once you become a familiar face, a familiar voice, that they're more willing to help you. And all of us on this panel, if we probably add up all the connections we have, there's probably in the thousands. So I would definitely just consider just expanding your network, making sure you're, it's just incredibly important to build community and connect and the connection, because you just never know who's out there ready to help you or is looking for someone as yourself. And they'll keep you in mind. They'll be like, oh, I know someone who I just spoke to a few days ago, or who posted on social media, or it's just having that engagement, because those are skills that you're going to carry into your next job as well.
All right, I'm going to move on to this question that was just posted in the chat. So Penelope asks, has anyone found success applying to postings where you may have not had the full skill set required? I commonly get discouraged when I do not check every box of something and I'm interested in pursuing.
This is just, I hope this is not like like an extreme, kind of political soapbox that I'm about to go on, but very frequently women do not apply for things that they do not feel like they are qualified to do. And there are plenty of mediocre white men that are getting paid to do things that you could definitely be doing better. So that's the mindset that I have really ingrained in myself. I have found success in applying for things where I do not meet the full skill set, because just getting my foot in the door and making a case for myself about what skills I have that are transferable to this job are really helpful. I sometimes write those in a cover letter. If I have the opportunity to reach out to in bigger companies or organizations, an HR person, I will pitch myself to say, like, I can do this. Like, I am great at learning. I can hustle. Like, I know what I'm doing. And these past experiences show you that I can really pivot and learn something quickly. So I think a lot of it is about making a case for yourself and remembering that you are just as qualified as, again, the next over mediocre white man that is applying for that job.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. If any of the panelists have anything they want to echo on, feel free. If not, I can move on.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I couldn't agree more. And I want to say that a large chunk of the jobs that I had, I wasn't qualified for. So I do think it's important, like I mentioned earlier, to just have that confidence and tenacity to really go after what you want, but also be a realist and realize, like, okay, is this something that I'm going to be able to pull off? Not pull off in a sense like, oh, I'm going to, lie about my skills. No, not at all. Like, as far as just making sure that you can convince them that you're willing to learn, that you're a hustler, that you really want this badly. And you will find that a lot of times they will give you an opportunity, but you really need to like go after what you feel would be best suited for yourself and how you could grow into it.
Yeah, I would say that also, like, when we put out postings, we put like everything that we ever desired, kind of like a wish list candidate, but we wouldn't expect that anyone could even fulfill all of those. And for me, what's most important is, yes, there should be some demonstrated skill set, but if I see that the person is difficult to work with, if I see really bad habits, they're challenging, if I feel like they won't be really great at taking directives, I rather a person that meets most of the skill sets but they're really great than someone that's 100% meeting every desired quality out there. And also, like, you'd expect that some people could learn certain skills that are on there as well on the job, and some skills are more forgivable than others. So I would definitely apply if you think it's at least reasonable that you could do most of it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I'm going to move on just for time's sake. And I think this will be our last question. Blair, you have a question?
Hi, yes. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so thank you all for sticking on a few minutes over and sharing your stories. I had a question more as a sustainable artist, so this may be more geared towards Xochil or Samuel, but anyone as an artist who tries to source materials, fabrics, everything I can as sustainably as I can. It's certainly a labor and something that can take a lot of time, a huge mental toll and energy. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on balancing sustainability, but also kind of knowing when to set boundaries for, and kind of finding that balance.
I totally agree. It's so hard, especially because the more it's so hard to find the right stuff. Either you're working with other countries and it takes so long to get to you, and it's just a swatch book. Or I'm coming from my side. I'm not sure what kind of art you do, but yeah, you go to a sustainable mill and they send you swatches, and that takes a month, and then you order, and then it takes 2 months, and it's way more than, like, recycled nylon is way more expensive than regular nylon. And I don't know why. It's I guess it is because people want sustainable fabric. So it's like this market that really shouldn't be more overpriced, but it's just because of the demand, I guess. Economists know more about that than me, but I totally agree. But I think on a less technical side, I think it's just really important to understand that you have a passion for it. You want to be it. So just remember that when it gets a little more stressing, just be like, this is like, I want to make my footstep or my whatever a lot less deep than otherwise. So just find that joy, right? That's all I can really say, because it's really about, like, it's the labor of love. So yeah.
Blair, I wanted to add that it is incredibly difficult being in the ethical, responsible market. And I'm saying this because I've done fast fashion before. It was a lot easier to design in fast fashion than what I'm doing now, because we actually need to work kind of in a way that, and I understand what you're saying, it does sometimes become very draining, because we're wearing our hearts, on our sleeves, and we really want to better the planet, but it's incredibly difficult because I'm like myself, I work around dead stock fabric, thrifted garments. I'm designing after I find the items, not beforehand. Whereas before I had all the fabrics available to me, all the tools, everything, and I was resourcing them, and I'd be designing. And so it was kind of a very, the way normally traditional fashion design courses have always taught us. But in sustainability, it's completely the opposite. And it could be very tolling on our mental health, because we're giving up so much of ourselves because we want to do the right thing, and we want to be the most ethically responsible way of integrating our skills. So I would suggest getting involved with communities. I think for myself, that's what's really been very therapeutic, is finding my community that is also on the same page. Because as a sole entrepreneur, incredibly small brand, a startup, it's a lonely journey. And especially when you're giving up so much of your time and effort to do things in the right way. So I would definitely lean on building your own group, community, and leaning on them. But I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Going to add to the sourcing thing, I feel like is a difficult thing for anyone, even large companies sometimes, but especially for small companies, and especially when you're trying to be sustainable. Don't try to, put too much pressure to like do all the things. I feel like all of us here probably care very deeply about, the future of our fashion industry and the sustainability. And it's kind of a lot for us to bear the burden of. So sometimes I think it's more digestible when you can say, okay, like for this, I'm going to focus on like, a sustainable fiber, or this I'm going to focus on like, bringing it to a factory, or if you're making it yourself, like bring it to a place where I know that the labor is ethical and people are paid fairly for their work and it's a safe working condition, and like bite off, one piece at a time and work, toward those goals. Know that you're not going to be perfect, but you're still doing better than, the fast fashion companies of the world. And because you care, you are doing better. So I think like what Zoe said earlier is like, we're here to learn and to get better, all of us, no matter how many years we've had in the industry.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists, for answering those questions. Now we're going to move on to upcoming events that some of you guys have, so that the audience knows what's going on in your guys' life. So Christy, I think, is going to post the information in the chat. But let's see. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties on the slides. Christy, actually, I'm sorry. Which slide am I looking at?
Hey, no worries at all. I just wanted to jump in that at this point, speakers can feel free to just mention any upcoming events they have, and I can go ahead and post the bios of the speakers so that the audience can follow along as well.
So panelists, feel free to share anything, even if it's something minor, just about what you guys are up to right now.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm very active on Clubhouse, and I do have a talk tomorrow in regards to the future of fashion, which we'll be talking about digital designs, and also having, like it falls into the line of education and sustainability courses and Clo 3D and anything that is getting innovated for fashion, that it's supportive of fashion. And then also we're talking about the laws that are coming in place with the SB 62. And also I have the climate lobbyist conversations on Monday in regards to the fashion bill here at 2307. So everyone is welcome for that. But I also have a sustainable slow living festival that's coming up in October 2nd, as well as I'm part of the community. I'm the liaison for San Francisco Sustainable Fashion Week. And there's a few other events, Swapateria, but I don't want to take up too much space. So I'm here to support anyone that needs any help in anything. And I'm pretty much always connecting people. So I hope I'm able to help anyone who's listening. So thank you so much.
It was so great, first of all, just to meet everyone and hear everyone's stories and all the other panelists. I'm really, really inspired by all of y'all. I do not have anything structured coming up looking forward, but on Eco Chic, I do host a book club once a month. If you are looking into getting into more reading, more environmental work. Last month, we read The Conscious Closet by Elizabeth Klein and had a discussion on the show. And the way book club works is you just read along and then you listen to the episode at the end. This upcoming month, we're reading a fiction book. So if you're looking into starting a new podcast to get into, but also getting into more of an environmental reading kick, I would love for you to join me.
What was that again?
On Eco Chic podcast, next month we are reading The Overstory by Richard Powers, which is a fiction climate book, which I'm really excited about. Last month we read The Conscious Closet by Elizabeth Klein, and then you can just join whenever you're interested. So you can listen to old episodes. We read that Bill Gates climate book, which was a really controversial hot take. And I've read a couple of other fiction books in the past. So it's a fun time if you're looking into getting into a book club.
Oh, so for Fashion of Tomorrow, last year, like spring and fall, we launched a campaign called Vote for Fashion with 15 other organizations that were concerned about the lack of laws addressing sustainable fashion. So this year, what we're doing, we launched in late spring. So we are going to organize actual meetings with legislators, and we're willing to meet with any legislator, really. The call to action in the letter is really what will they do with their platform to address some of the issues. So I would recommend going to fashionoftomorrow.org and just signing up for more information about that. Really, anyone can organize a meeting with their own legislator. We'd be happy to help you facilitate that. And we really look forward to seeing what they'll have to say in response.
I'm kind of, it's weird times, so I don't have any physical events coming up, but on one of my missions on like sustainability is I kind of do what Clementina does. I try to find garments and rework them, as well as Xochil. So I have a show. It's called I Can Make That. And I'm really hoping to put the second season out within the next like 4 or 5 months. It's a huge production, but check it out. It's I Can Make That. And it's, I think if you type in I Can Make That, and then go down a couple pages, you might find it. But that's like my way of showing people that it's actually a lot easier to rework something, or to see like a vinyl banner, for instance. Like that thing will last forever. You can put it in the dirt, and we all know that, right? That's what vinyl and plastic and petroleum, all that stuff is. So I show the process of turning that into something else. So I really hope to release that, and then I'm gonna be on another panel soon. So I'll send Christy that stuff when I get the dates. And then I'm in Sacramento, so I do have like a couple little shows. I plan on doing a little like a flash show. So like there's a big event in Sacramento coming up, and I'm just gonna do like one of those like flash mobs, but a fashion show. So we'll see how that is. I'm kind of nervous about it. But other than that, I'm just sitting back working. Oh, I did wardrobe for a movie a while back, and that hopefully comes out soon. I'm still kind of on an NDA, but I'll also post that soon too. So, but events, not really, it's a weird time for events. So yeah.
I'm not involved in the event as a speaker, but the organization that I'm on the board, AIBI, their website's aibi.com. They are doing a business of fashion seminar series. So if anyone here is interested in learning about like websites or marketing, or like lots of things to do with like young designers and getting in the industry, there's a ton of events the first week of August. So I'd encourage you to check that out. But yeah, I'm headed into like kind of busy fall season. I feel like it's always busy. Everyone's, starting the new stuff for spring or for next fall, and it's good. But thank you so much. This was an awesome panel, and I really got so much enjoyment from learning everyone's story here. Thank you.
Awesome. For me, also not any. Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
I'll do it in the chat. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I was going to say nothing specific, I guess, to fashion at this point, but if you are interested in supply chain and sustainability as a whole across different industries, I do want to plug two organizations that I'm involved in. Not necessarily all the events, but they do have events here and there, specifically for the Women in Supply Chain event that I will share later, maybe Zoe or I could put it in the chat later. But they do women in business and women in supply chain events across it's usually on Zoom, so it's pretty accessible. And then the other organization, if you're ever interested in joining a local community, youth-led community that does local projects on topics like climate change, for example, definitely check out Global Shapers. They're in about over 400 cities around the world. So you also do get to connect across continents and across countries and across cities even within the US. And it's really great. It's a fun time. And you get to learn about different things like fashion, for example, which is where I met Ashley, and who's the current US Director of Fashion Revolution. So just wanted to plug those two organizations.
All right, thank you guys so much. If I'm not mistaken, you guys all shared about your current events or upcoming events. So we can move on to me just thanking you all so much for coming to this event. And thank you so much, panelists, for giving us your time and knowledge and inspiring myself and everyone here so much. So thank you so much again. I think Christy and I are going to end the recording, and then just feel free to hop off the Zoom. But thank you so much. All right, and also for people in the audience, if you want to connect, feel free to copy and paste the information that we put in the chat about the panelists. You guys can connect and answer any last minute questions if that's all right with all of you. All right.